Hi, I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write for the New York Times and the New Yorker.
And I'm Peter Marks, theater critic for the Washington Post. We're back with another episode of Marks and Vincentelli, giving you all the theater conversation you need since 2022.
I know, it feels like forever. It's like it's
Yes.
us and cats, now and forever.
Now and forever.
So today we have a special episode. We're having our first return guest, Dr. Blythe Adamson, who's proven so popular that we decided to invite her again. But also, I mean, not just that, but also there's been kind of changes in Broadway policies regarding masks. I wanted to talk to her about where we stand. And a lot of people are kind of upset that masks will not be required at Broadway shows in July. I think it's a kind of test month. So we're going to talk to Dr. Adamson, who works with a lot of Broadway productions, actually. So she really has like an inside track on that. And I always find her incredibly comforting, actually. She reassures me when I'm feeling completely paranoid about everything.
That's really good. I've been talking to Dr. Blythe Adamson since last year when she set in motion the protocols for the first play back to Broadway, Passover, as its epidemiologist advisor. She's worked with, as Elizabeth says, many shows since then. Her company, Infectious Economics, which she formed before the pandemic was on the horizon. It's a pioneer in the field of helping to establish guidelines for pandemic safety in theaters, sports arenas, for the NBA, and other public spaces. So we're thrilled to welcome back Dr. Blythe Adamson. We've given you her a short version of her resume. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Adamson. Can you just give us, maybe it's helpful to set the table here. Where are we in terms of the leading information about what needs to be done to keep people protected both actors, crew members, and audiences in theaters?
Well, it's an interesting time in the pandemic right now. It's June of 2022, and we've just had a bigger than expected spring wave. And what it looks like now is a wave upon a wave. So in April and May, we had BA.2.12, this highly transmissible subvariant of Omicron hitting New York City. And now, only a month later, many people are being reinfected again, 3 to 4 weeks later with a different Omicron sublineage, BA4 or 5. And so the prevalence of COVID right now in the community is high. These strains are very transmissible. Thankfully, the vaccines are continuing to keep people out of the hospital. So we're really grateful for that. And all of the ways that we know how to prevent COVID are still true. So clean air or being outdoors, wearing a good mask, testing to be able to detect that someone's infectious before going into a really risky situation. All of those things are still true, but we are learning the nuances now of this new Omicron BA.4/5 strain.
So since this is still true, despite that, there is a change coming. We'll talk about the Broadway theaters for now. So this is still true. There's a very highly contagious variant around. People are getting reinfected. I myself got COVID in May. That was my first time. And I would say, like last year, I would have thought, oh, okay, I'm good for a while. But that is not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I was like,
it's true.
So like now, I mean, I still have to be just as cautious as I was. It's just not working anymore in terms of providing at least a few months of respite. Not that I was going to, go and party massless, but anyway, so now there's this change in policy for Broadway theaters where mask is optional. I was at a Broadway show last night. I can tell you that technically it was still a mandate, but there was no enforcement whatsoever. And when there's no enforcement, people are going to take it off. And they did. So I was really not happy about that. So that's definitely what's going to happen in July, times a lot more. So where do you stand on that? Like, what was your first reaction when you heard about that policy change?
It's controversial to have an opinion about this, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm in favor of taking away the mask mandates in theaters.
Whoa!
And
I did not
I
see that
know.
coming.
I know. Let me tell you why. Really, we are shifting from mandates that are for a population, mandating anything, and shifting towards individual choice. And the reason why we're able to shift to individual choice, individual level of risk that you're willing to accept, is that now we have the healthcare capacity. We have ways that people can protect themselves individually. And, mandates for a population level really should only be used when there's a significant societal benefit reason that we must be doing it. But right now we have so many different tools available to protect us, vaccines and masks, that my health outcomes are now less dependent on other people's choices. And I can make choices to protect myself.
Blythe, I'm curious. So how do we, you hear constantly from people online, outrage over the idea that there's not going to be this sort of uniform requirement, this uniform policy. How does one persuade? And I know you're an advocate of everybody has their own level of safety in mind, and they have to follow their own sense of the world. How does one convince people who are very adamant about masks to understand what you're just saying? That, if you're protecting yourself, it's likely that the other people around you are not going to be a threat if they're not wearing a mask. Is that something that can be communicated in a way that doesn't incite people?
I hope so. I think that one of the other things to think through when you're imagining being an audience member and going down and sitting in the middle of a really big crowd, it's really the people that are sitting right around you that are the ones that could possibly be exposing you. And if you're down near the front, the person that's in the balcony doesn't make any difference to you, is not going to change your risk level at all. And, so if you're feeling very conservative, you really want to go see a show, you can go sit in that seat. Really, there's maybe 6 people, 10 people kind of in that cluster around you. And with a high quality, high filtration mask that's got a good fit around your face, those N95, KN95s, KF94s, get one cute to match your outfit. You really can protect yourself. I mean, this is during the few hours that you will be sitting around these other people. So I think that even if you're sitting next to people that are unmasked, you can still enjoy the show comfortably. And now what we're seeing by allowing people to make their individual choices is that the hope then is that everyone will be able to feel more comfortable by making their own choice. And with the summer and admitting that, economic revitalization in New York City is still really important. Tourism is so important for getting our strong workforce, back and employed. All the spillover benefits that packed Broadway shows have on restaurants and hotels and retail and transportation. There's so many jobs that this affects. And so I want, my dream is that the policies align with keeping our community healthy, and that there's both the dimensions of healthcare capacity, but also the well-being of all the people that live here. So there's many dimensions to think of together.
I have one other thing along these lines. So I have been to, as Elizabeth has, dozens of shows. I have not gotten COVID as far as I know, and I've been tested, probably 70 times. So I have some. I have some sense that I'm not just self-testing, but going to places, doing interviews, go traveling. There's all kinds of places where I've been tested. I have not gotten it. I feel comfortable masked sitting in a theater. My question is, are the notions of how this is contracted so baked in by this point, by 2 years into this pandemic, endemic, wherever we are, that it's people's mindsets are too deeply entrenched in what they think to change how they think? And is there some responsibility collectively of the experts and the community to reassure, not to compel people to come back, but to change their attitude so that they feel comfortable with people unmasked around them?
Change is really hard. I completely agree with you. And the mental health burden from lockdown, from masking for so long, the social anxiety that many people have is very, very real. But so many things have changed over time, and our behavior is allowed to change accordingly. And one of the biggest achievements that in drug discovery has been Paxlovid, these antivirals. I mean, they're incredible. So the Paxlovid it's available free because our government has already paid more than $500 a box for people to be able to get access. There's a great government website if you just go to covid.gov to even find if you've recently become infected and you're high risk of bad health outcomes. You can find the local pharmacy near you that has it in stock. But factors like that, having access to an antiviral that will help us recover faster and with fewer symptoms is just another piling on reason why it may be okay to change our behavior, given it's reaping the benefits of all of the great technologies and resources that we have access to here. So I think it's good for people to change. I mean, I hope this isn't interpreted as like, let's go wild now and all get COVID over and over. But I would say, you will eventually get it, Peter. It will come for you.
Like, for instance, in my case, I had a I was really down for like a couple of days. But speaking of viral, like when I had shingles a few years ago, that was like 1,000 times worse than my COVID experience. By the way, everybody get that. If you're of Asia, get that shingles vaccine because you do not want to get shingles. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
But you also work with the show, with productions themselves. Like, is anything changing behind the scene? Like, what's happening? How are all the productions adapting their protocols? Are they staying the course? Are they maybe testing less or more? Like, what's happening with that?
Well, the protocols right now have the frequency of testing dependent on two things. The level of burden in the community. Is it green, yellow, red? That is a union mandated frequency of testing dependent on what's happening in the community. Now, that becomes a little more difficult as we've got more and more cases that are not getting reported with just at-home rapid tests, and counting precisely is just not something that public health feels is necessary to do anymore. So we are going to get a little bit of a divergence between what's actually reported and what the true burden is in our community. But the other factor that goes into how rigid, how stringent, how protective the protocols are backstage is dependent on how many recent cases there have been within that company, within that production. And I'm seeing that as a much bigger driver within shows of how strict they're being, how frequently they need to be doing these tests. And that seems smart to me. So there are shows that are continuing to have outbreaks that are just really hard to get rid of. And there are shows that are continuing to go forward with no cases in months. And there are lots of different factors that go into. those
I was
things.
going
Yeah.
to say, is one of them like cast size, for example? Because I would say if you've got a cast, especially if you have an ensemble of like younger dancers or singers who maybe, I think you had mentioned in our previous podcast, like, maybe they'll have roommates, or like it's harder to track than
Mhm.
if you have a cast of 3 or 4
Mhm.
and they're, like older stars and there's no ensemble that you have to worry about. Like, is that a factor in your experience? Or although they did have an outbreak in in American Buffalo, I think, didn't they? Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, you can have cases in any size of show. One
Right.
of the things that I'm observing is that shows that are taking it seriously are able to create safe workplaces for casts
Hmm.
and crews when they show up to work at the theater. So I'm almost never seeing transmissions happen at the workplace within the theater. But what's interesting of why we're still seeing outbreaks, the appearance of clusters of cases within these theaters is they all hang out together after work. So a lot of these smaller outbreaks that I'm seeing are because the the friendships and relationships between cast and crews, they're like a tightly knitted family. And so, after work, when they go and spend leisure time together and they don't have to follow the rules that are in the workplace, that's most often explaining when I see continued clusters of cases within a company.
Mm.
Do you think that's interesting? I mean, I wonder now, you're making me think that, the kind of socialization that happens in a cast, in a large cast, is maybe different than some other workplaces. Maybe it's more intense because it is 8 times a week on Broadway anyway. Does it present an additional obstacle to getting it? And I'm really interested in how we all get back to something, maybe never, maybe there'll always be a vigilance that exists in people's consciousness that's different than pre-pandemic. But is the cancellation of performances, and in some cases a week of performances still, I've had this happen to me in DC several times in the last month, is that messaging alone, and it may not just be because of COVID, it could be because of the way in which it's cast in terms of understudies. There may not be enough understudies or whatever the company has prepared for on this level. Is that becoming an impediment to more confidence across the public in the fact that we are at this other stage, that we are at an endemic stage, and that these precautions that are more individualized will suffice? I wonder how much more convincing, and maybe even does the media have a responsibility in trying to, lay this out for people in a way that makes them, not that people trust the media anymore that much, but I wonder, I wonder what the,
Well, there's some good
as a,
journalists that I trust. So the ones that listen to scientists.
Yeah, God bless. But I wonder if you, as a person with a hand in both economics and epidemiology, see this as is this partially a public relations issue? I mean, to put it, as coarsely as possible.
So I'm just going to repeat back to make sure that I've got this. At the heart of the question, it seems like what's driving ticket sales? Because
Right.
You've got different levers. What I'm hearing from you is lack of confidence that the show is really going to go on.
Right.
And maybe it's not worth me buying a ticket if there's a possibility it's going to be canceled and
Right.
mess up all my plans. If I've flown from out of state to New York City to go see this show and then it's canceled and I've wasted, thousands of dollars on hotel and plane tickets, like maybe I shouldn't do this. So on that it's a true uncertainty. And for each show, they have to assess who's our audience, where do they live, would the likelihood of this being canceled affect whether or not they want to buy a ticket. It's also why I think groups that like Roundabout or Lincoln Center that have subscriptions for an entire season may be affected by this differently than like a one-off show that someone may purchase a ticket for. But all of that has to be balanced by how much it really does add costs to a show to stack it deep with understudies to be able to prevent the cancellation. And those are really difficult decisions that these producers and general managers have to build these economic models to make those trade-offs. And I think that it probably depends on the type of audience that you're trying to attract.
Right. And also, I mean, even without a cancellation, some people, like if you have a super fan of Sutton Foster or Hugh Jackman who travel to see them and the show is on, but they're not, as good as the understudy is, you're going to be a little disappointed. And it's a bummer. And that, but the show did go on. But I'm wondering, actually, we were talking, I mean, Peter used the word earlier, like endemic. And like, if we go for a bigger picture, I mean, should we now think about like a norm where we're all more vigilant in general about communicable diseases in communal spaces? Like, is that going to be, there will be, I mean, like, to me, I mean, as a complete all the science I know I learned from science fiction movies, so take that with a grain of salt. But I feel certain there will be another, like some other.
Like monkeypox?
like here.
Monkeypox.
There will continue to be, ones.
Do we are there like structural changes that are going to happen to, the way we behave? And I'm assuming it'll be up to a point, to an individual choice, unless it's really like terrible. But like, what do you think? I mean, do you think we have to adjust in general?
I think we will see small changes. If you think about communal spaces and public restrooms, you go into a public restroom, there's toilet paper available. There is a machine that has tampons or pads that are available for sanitary purposes. And I think that we'll begin to see masks becoming available. So, these small modifications where all of a sudden we have this awareness now that many people will have a time and a place where they'll need something for their health purposes. And I think that masks will become more a part of that. And I'm hoping that one of the longer term benefits will be the modifications that we've made for the air quality in buildings that are public spaces. But as you said, new viruses will keep coming.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering about. There's a lot of in the media suddenly about monkeypox, and I don't know if it's that the media latches on quickly to now has a whole sort of viral consciousness that it didn't have before. But I wonder, Blythe, is how do we differentiate for in the spaces in which you advise about protocols? How do we differentiate between these threats and something that comes along again like monkeypox?
Well, monkeypox is not going to shut down or cancel a Broadway show. So it's completely different in that sense. It also transmits completely differently. It's not aerosolized. It's passed through touching and through fabric.
Okay, you have not seen me at a Broadway show, like, clearly.
Oh, really?
No, I'm kidding. I just want an excuse to say monkeypox. Monkeypox.
But there's an important reason why it should matter to the Broadway community, and that's because of the sexual networks and social networks through which we're seeing the burden of monkeypox. And it's predominantly in men who have sex with men. So this, I'm expecting there to be a surge in New York City very soon of monkeypox. And where we're seeing it like actually affect people, we're seeing pox now in mouth and genitals, in the anus. So it's passing very similarly like some of the older sexually transmitted diseases that we've known before. But it can take a few weeks for symptoms to develop. So this is from Broadway community perspective, the take-home message should really be pay attention to your body. Really, if you have any kind of rash develop or anything new, best place to go is a sexual health clinic. Unlike COVID testing, where you could go to a regular doctor's office or a mobile testing site, monkeypox testing is not widely available yet. And the expertise of how to do it properly and where to send it really lies at these sexual health clinics. And for people who are high at risk, there is a vaccine that's available to prevent monkeypox. There's just a pretty limited supply right now, so we really want to use it strategically. But because it does transfer on fabrics, and I'm very conscious of costumes that may be shared between people, wardrobe departments, I'm staying alert to this and thinking through the risks and opportunities we have for surveillance if necessary, and hoping that this remains a minor issue, but education will be the key so that if anyone does begin experiencing a rash in casts or crews, that they feel comfortable surfacing that right away and know exactly where to go and how to get it treated.
That's great advice. And I think that's a great place to wrap up, for people to pay attention to their bodies. That's a very salient, important bit of advice to keep in one's mind. So thank you, Dr. Adamson, for your time again.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if I'm the first guest you've ever had to use the word anus on your podcast, but thanks for.
And you know what? Hopefully you won't be the last.
Oh my God. Oh, you heard. Oh, my goodness!
I went there.
Yes,
I had to go. Listen, we want to get more listeners, and I'm ashamed of nothing. I will do whatever it takes.
All right. My face is turning red in Lower Manhattan, but I'm an older guy. But we greatly appreciate, Dr. Adamson, you're returning, and once again, you're a trailblazer, both in terms of information and vocabulary. So we appreciate both those things.
Thank you. And thank you. I was actually a little worried after last night. And once again, you've completely reassured me. Not that I'm not going to go crazy, but it feels like okay, all right, I don't need to panic. I know what I'm doing. I'm being careful. I'm looking after myself. And, it's a start. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's always great having Blythe on. She just really, as you said, Elizabeth, she puts it all in perspective in a way that makes you get the bigger picture.
Listen, I was a little freaked out after my experience at the August Wilson Theater last night, where I saw Funny Girl. And
you finally saw Funny Girl.
I know. It's been rescheduled something 4 or 5 times, sometimes because of my schedule. Well, I had COVID, and then they had Beanie Feldstein had COVID, so it was always something. But I finally saw it. Oh my God, we should save that conversation for another episode, because I have thoughts. But in the meantime,
did you feel it was hazardous to your health anyway?
I was fully masked. So, but I'm not sure my brain was left unaffected by that show. Oh,
well, that's it. You can't mask your brain.
There's some decisions that have been made for that show that I find really puzzling. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
Well, we should do a separate show on maybe on casting.
Oh yes,
and
casting.
Maybe we should talk about this star casting these days, and how the fits are not ideal sometimes. In fact, I think there are several examples of that this season.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, until the next time, we're unstoppable in our, now classic podcast since 2022. I'm Elizabeth Vincentielli. I write for the New York Times and the New Yorker.
And I'm Peter Marks. Thanks for lending an ear to our podcast. We'll be back soon with another episode of Marks and Vincentielli.